A quick reminder before we begin the episode. If you haven't rated and reviewed our podcast yet, please consider doing it now. It only takes a second and makes a huge difference to us. With that being said, on with the show.
All events depicted in this podcast are real. However, the names, locations, and some details have been changed for the privacy of those involved.
Hello and welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of Walking on Eggshells with an Emotional Vampire, a podcast that above all things is about family.
Throughout all of human history, there have been people of infamy. Notorious characters that with just the mention of their name can conjure strong, palpable emotions. Names like Joseph Stalin and Lord Voldemort. Names like these have such power that they are universally recognized across the world, spanning generations. But there are other people of infamy too, ones that aren't quite so well known. These people may not be responsible for genocides, and their crimes may not horrify the masses, but in their time and place, for a select few, they are just as repulsive. Our family has one of these characters, who can still hijack any conversation with just the mere mention of their name, bringing us back to the time when we were under their influence. And who is this person? And how is it that they were able to wield this influence? That, my friends, is the topic of today's episode. The story of Bulldog Face. After years of tension and heartache, Mum and Dad's separation had been decided, and we all felt some relief. No longer was our family going to be held hostage, waiting to see if the parents were able to get their shit together. And at long last, arrangements could be made so that we all could move forward. At this point, Dad had been living in a trailer park for almost a year, which all of us kids were upset about. But now, finally, this could be remedied.
So, Mum and Dad had bought a second house early on. And when they finally decided that, yes, this separation's going ahead, Dad said, you can have that house if I can go live in the other house and I'll finish paying off that other house.
Years before, the parents had purchased an investment property, and until this point, it had been rented out and the money made was used to pay the mortgage. During the separation, Mum had been particularly ruthless when it came to Dad, and I remember being concerned that she might try to stop him from getting the second house. But this wasn't the case, which was a relief. But that being said, the arrangements for the separation did always seem to tip in Mum's favour.
Mum let Dad have the other house, and Dad gave Mum everything. Everything that was still in the original house, that was all Mum's. And Dad lived in the second house with nothing. I think he had a mattress on the floor and a blow-up pink couch.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. He had nothing in that house. It was empty. And not only that, he took on the debt because that house wasn't paid off yet, and Mum got the house that was completely paid off. So she got no debt and all the possessions, and Dad really had nothing. I do think that it was a bit performative, him having that pink couch in there and not just filling the house up straight away, but he definitely got the bum deal out of the whole thing.
Yep.
There is a lot that can be said regarding the terms of the separation and the years of ongoing drama that it caused. And you can be sure that it will be the topic of many podcasts to come. But for now, we have other things to discuss.
Even though Dad did get the bum deal out of the separation, he did go to work straight away fixing the house up. So we weren't really worried about him because he didn't seem depressed or anything like that. And he's a good builder. He can do anything. So he started doing renovations and things on there. He just held onto that pink couch longer than he needed to. But
you might think with all that had happened and the prospect of starting a new life well after his prime, Dad might have lost some of his magnetic alpha male exuberance. But this wasn't the case.
For me, Dad seemed awesome. He just had that charisma about him where he'd draw people into his circle, so he had this strong support network. And he had this revolving door sort of feeling about his house where he always had people coming in and going, and they were always drinking and eating good food, and it's just a lot of fun to be around. Actually, when I think about it, it does sound like a midlife crisis. So maybe he was having a midlife crisis, but sometimes I guess midlife crises are fun.
Throughout Dad's midlife crisis, I was back and forth from overseas. But when I was in town, I always looked forward to checking in for a drink with the regular cast of characters that were at Dad's place. But on one of these visits, I couldn't help but notice a unique face. One that didn't fit in with the usual crew of tradesmen and labourers.
And there was a woman there, and it was always all men at Dad's place, so that was odd to start with. But then I remember thinking, wow, that's an interesting looking woman.
This was Bulldog Face. And while interesting looking is one way to describe her, to get a truly nuanced appraisal of her appearance, I'm going to need some help.
Oh, I'm recording now too.
All right, we're all here then. That's awesome.
We're recording.
I'm recording too.
We're all recording.
So the first thing I've got is basically just for everyone to basically describe Bulldog Face in detail. I've got some notes and stuff. Obviously, I've come prepared. So maybe it's best if I get the ball rolling. The first thing I've got written down here, what was I imagine her as like, if you imagine like a gremlin, but its head is kind of like a walnut with its dryness and its texture. That's that's
Leatherface.
Leatherface. That's kind of how I see her.
Leatherface and real shriveled boobs with tattoos, like butterfly tattoos on her boobs and stuff.
A quick warning for the listener. If you're the kind of person who gets triggered by this kind of content, and by this kind of content, I mean 3 kids ripping and berating their dad's ex-girlfriend in a twisted yet cathartic way, then you might want to skip forward a few minutes.
I thought I actually had like evil gnome written down.
Oh, that's good.
Actually, on second thoughts, you're probably better off skipping this episode completely.
Kind of like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, when that guy drinks out of the wrong cup and then he ages 1,000 years in 30 seconds.
You chose poorly.
That one. That's how I imagine her as well. She's the hair grows long and then
Dad chose poorly.
it's like she, instead of having connective tissue, she was just straight cancer.
The whole of her was melanoma.
100% melanoma. And she I imagine she also, vampires sleep in a coffin, but she would have slept in a tanning booth.
Yes.
Like the full leather skin, what you call a leather person, that was her. Like super wrinkly face, like...
You can make a handbag out of her skin.
Yeah.
Perfectly.
She wasn't attractive either.
I mean, does any part of what we've just said make her sound attractive?
Yeah, I know, but that's the thing. Like, you couldn't even find something that was attractive. None of anything about her was attractive.
And when she smoked cigarettes, her lips pursed and there was like 50,000 crinkles in her lips.
But what do you mean when she smoked cigarettes? She was never not smoking cigarettes. She exhaled straight nicotine. Her blood was tar positive.
Everything was dry. She just looked dry.
And even her hairstyle wasn't.
It was dry too.
I mean, exactly. I was.
If it rained on her, her skin would have just sucked up the moisture. Thankfully, like, please give me more.
Yeah, but she would have stayed dry.
Yeah, it would have bounced off her. I think it would have turned to steam as soon as it hit her.
Evaporated.
And with the hair, it was like when people get hair implants. It didn't look like it was naturally in her head. There were like spaces between them. Like it was like doll hair or something.
Yeah. And it was dyed like over and over again black. I'm pretty sure it was brown or black.
The conversation about Bulldog Face's appearance was a black hole. It was a deep, dark, never-ending void floating in space that could lead anywhere at any moment. And I truly believe that we may have ended up lost in this black hole forever if I hadn't come to an abrupt realization.
So none of that description actually has anything about a bulldog or a dog or a canine of any sort in there. How do we have the nickname Bulldog Face for her?
Well, that was Ellie's contribution.
Yeah, that's because that's exactly what it looks like. She's got the saggy jowls on the cheeks. It's like the leather skin, the way she talks, and
she's everything. Every derogatory, disgusting term you could have, because she looks like a gremlin. She looks like a leprechaun. She looks like a walnut. She looks like a leather handbag. And she looks like a bulldog.
Like Mole Man off The Simpsons.
Mole Man off The Simpsons. That's perfect.
It's like kissing a prune.
That is her. That is. If that was a female
with dark leathery skin though.
Yeah, it needs
not yellow skin.
If Mole Man was left in the oven a little bit too long.
With hair plugs.
With hair plugs, yeah. And like more energy. She was definitely like
aggression.
She had more aggression and more energy. She
like an angry bulldog.
Yeah. See, maybe it's the attitude is what gave the bulldog appearance. Like maybe she doesn't. If you looked at her, I don't think you see bulldog. I think it's the attitude.
Yeah.
With the mystery of Bulldog Face's name solved and the details of her mythic appearance discussed, I decided it was time to get the conversation back on track by delving into the origins of the sisters' connection to Dad's rebound relationship.
Rebound reject.
Predictably, this was no easy task. And when I was able to get the dialogue back on track and find out how 16-year-old Aria was able to find out for the first time that her dad was seeing another woman, the conversation was once again derailed.
I visited Dad for one of the weekends and she was there and I went to bed and then I just heard noises from Dad's bedroom, which was right next to mine. Not good noises. And she had obviously, she was living there. She had nowhere else to go. And then she, was making very loud noises.
What type of noises? Did it sound like a dog being kicked?
Like a...
Did it sound, was it in between like a dog and a pig?
Actually, that's pretty much exactly what it was until I put my headphones in and I slept with the music on. That's how I fell asleep because I was traumatized.
I can't even imagine Dad had like regular intercourse with her. I just imagine she would have sat on top of him and vibrated.
No, that would have been how it went. He would have been doing all the work.
Just with a cigarette in her hand, laying on the bed.
Exactly, laying there with a cigarette, blowing the smoke out.
He's just trying to hydrate himself as much as possible because she's just sucking all of the moisture out of his body. And he's just drinking Gatorades and just pumping lubrication down on the lower half of his body.
You're so fucked up.
Oh, it's making me feel sick.
What the hell? That is disgusting. What is that?
Fuck, this is just making the memory way worse. Thanks, guys.
I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that what you're listening to is a textbook example of the children of a failed marriage projecting all of their negative emotions regarding their parents' separation onto their idolized father's new lover. And you might be right. We are brutal in the way we judge this woman. But before you come to any conclusions, you should know one thing. It wasn't just her appearance that gave us reason to criticize.
So, going back to like when we first met, we went to stay at Dad's and we get there literally not even a couple of minutes in, being pleasant. Hi, how are you? How's it going? Whatever. She said, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a PA. At the time I was a PA. And she went, oh, you're a secretary. And I went, no, I'm a PA. There's a lot of different stuff in a secretary, looks after a lot of people, a PA, is just after the one person normally, maybe two people. Oh, so you're just a glorified secretary. It's like, oh my God, who is this woman?
Well, what does she do?
She's a cleaner. I had no idea at the time, and I was that stunned at the time because I just literally met her in those 5 minutes.
It's the worst too, because when you don't know and you're like, you feel like you need to validate yourself.
Well, this is the thing, yeah. And I mean, Dad's motto or his philosophy was always like, be nice to people. If someone's in my house, you be nice to them, whatever, And I didn't even think to say, what do you do? Do you know what I mean? What's your job? Oh, you're a cleaner. Oh, so you scrub the shit off floors, I should have said. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? That's exactly how she just, like she was putting me down. I didn't even know the woman.
It didn't matter if you were a 30-something-year-old personal assistant or a high school girl. Bulldog Face always seemed to have a way to make you feel bad about yourself.
So I was like a 15-year-old girl and I'm standing in Dad's lounge room and she goes, Aria, stand up straight for a second. Aria. And so I stand up straight. She looks me up and down and she goes, You got bow legs. Did you know you've got bowed legs?
Both legs?
And I went, do I? Like, I never looked at my legs like that.
like a cowboy or something?
Yeah. And I'm like, okay. And then she's like, yeah, you got to get that sorted. You got to stand up straighter. You got bow legs. And I was like, oh, Jesus, all right.
In the early stages of the relationship, this is what a Bulldog Face attack looked like. They were frequent and covert. It was as if she was a demolition team discreetly cutting through the foundations of a building before blowing it to hell. Her attacks were designed to destabilize. And they weren't confined to us kids either. They could be directed at anything related to our family.
One of the best things about going to Dad's place was the food. We're of Russian descent, and we'd try and hold on to some of those traditions. And so we'd cook the food, we'd hand stretch the noodles ourselves and make these traditional Russian dishes that were really amazing. And everyone who came over loved the Russian food.
That's wog food.
Yeah, exactly. That was the thing. She hated it.
You're all wogs.
For those of you who don't know, wog, spelt W-O-G, is a mild Australian racial slur for a foreigner. I say mild, and this may only make sense if you are an Australian, because it's not always offensive, which is why Bulldog Face could use the term and not get booted out of the house. Interestingly, wog is also a slang word for a cold or a flu, but this probably comes from the idea that the sickness was brought into the country by a dirty foreigner. Either way, it's probably a term to avoid when you're talking to an Australian.
Yeah, that's wog food. Such a wog.
Yeah, get some real Australian. I love my pub meals. I eat that every day.
Yeah, what was it? It was meat pies, right? That was a thing. How stereotypically Australian is this chick that her favourite food was meat pies?
Yeah, but the pie is not only like it's that dehydrated, like it's got no moisture in it. You know, when you get one of those, it's real like...
Yeah, it's like an asteroid.
And she's eating it, it's kind of crumbling, but she's like,
I love this food.
It's like when you go to the service station at the end of the day and then there's a pie in the oven that's been there for 12 hours straight. It's all rock hard.
She was in the pie cooker. That's how
That's her bed.
That's her bed.
I got it wrong. It's not a tanning booth. It's a literal pie cooker. No. We're not doing this again. Let's stay on topic here. How about this? Do we know where it was that Dad found this woman?
She was drinking at the Scummy, which is the worst pub in our town.
At the beginning of this episode, I spoke about people of infamy. Notorious characters whose mere mention could evoke strong emotion. But what I didn't mention is this. There are locations of infamy also. Usually, these locations are a haunted house or a deserted field where years before a bloody battle took place. But they can also be a small shithole pub attached to a Chinese restaurant across the car park from the local shopping centre. This is what our location of infamy is, and it is known affectionately as the Scummy. It is also only fitting that a location like the Scummy gave birth to a character like Bulldog Face. The Scummy wasn't just a pub, it was an institution. And being open 7 nights a week, from early till late, it was the place that kept all the plebeians and degenerates off the street.
As disgusting as the Scummy was, it did hold a purpose, I think. It kept the shit off the street. The problem was that it just didn't keep it very far away, because it was so close to the shopping centre. So you'd have parents coming out of the shopping centre with their kids and then looking across the way and they're looking straight at the Scummy, just seeing people smoking cigarettes and fucking dealing crack or whatever it is that they do. It really was just right in your face.
Considering that the Scummy was a place where no respectable person would set foot, there always seemed to be an abundance of stories detailing the obscene events that went on inside. These stories would often be very specific, and often involve the people who were known as regulars of the bar.
It was in the early days of the internet, so download speeds were super slow. So it's not like today where people were just ripping porn off the internet. And there was these really low-end porn movies that started to do the rounds at school. The type of movie that when you saw it, you'd be like, oh my God, what the hell is this? Maybe I'll pass on that one. But as it turned out, that was actually a local pornographer that was making those. His name was Nigel. He was the town pornographer, as fucked up as that is. But then the story started to come out that after they had a porn shoot at Nigel's house, they would have their after party at the Scummy and they'd all go there and drink and get loose. And so then it became the thing to do where if you had a free period at school, you'd go down, order Chinese from the Scummy's Chinese restaurant, and then you'd try and look inside and see these filthy porn stars in there. And one of the big stories that came out of there was about one of the porn stars that was in the videos, and his name was Donk. He was actually a local painter. And they were in there having their after party, and there was a lady there drinking who wasn't part of their group, and she had a glass of wine. And she came over to him and she said, why do they call you Donk? And as a response, he ripped the wine glass out of her hand, and then he pulled his dick out and he put it into a wine glass. And when he put it in there, the head of it was so big that it couldn't actually fit in the glass. It just sat on the rim of the glass. And then he said to her, "That's why they call me Donk." And as legend has it, the entire bar erupted with applause when that happened.
We know that Dad and Bulldog Face met at the Scummy. Obviously, she was a regular at the bar, so it makes sense that he found her there. But what was Dad doing there? It certainly wasn't his local, and from my experience, no one ever went to the Scummy unless they had a reason. As a high schooler, I used to go there because they sold takeaway booze without checking IDs. I also know plenty of people who used to deal drugs there. And also, the Chinese food they served there was surprisingly good too. Lots of MSG, but good. So why was Dad there? He wasn't into drugs or MSG. We have a theory.
But I do have a theory about what he was doing there. So Dad did like to gamble a little bit. So I'm thinking that maybe he went in there to place some bets, and this is just speculation. I don't know if any of this is true, but with the dodgy stuff that was going on at the Scummy, maybe there were bookies there, and maybe he was able to get better odds on the horse races. So maybe that's his reason for being there.
That's probably what he probably went in there to put a few bets on.
Because I do remember him going in there, and then he'd get a beer, and then I think at one point he was getting a beer, and he'd get like a ticket for the horse races or the what do you call it, the dog races or whatever it was.
The dog races? Man, he won the ultimate dog.
And then she was running in first place, and he was like, I love her.
We won't ever know for sure the details of what prompted Dad to let Bulldog Face follow him home. And it really isn't important. What is important is the discovery that Ellie made, less than a year into their relationship.
And anyway, I remember her and Dad sitting next to each other, and then she sort of put a hand up to scratch her face or whatever, try and scratch a few wrinkles out or whatever. And I'd spotted the ring on her finger. And then when she might have got up to go to the bathroom or something, and I went, "Are you guys engaged?" And then he was like, I haven't told anybody yet or something like this. And I was just like, oh, okay. And then my heart sank, and I just thought, oh my God. And he was like, he did the thing, oh, what do you think about that? Blah, blah, blah. And I went, well, as long as you're happy kind of thing. It was the standard response when you're like,
what are you going to say, right? She's the worst? She's the worst thing possible?
No one's going to be happy about that, just as long as you're fucking happy, that's all.
The thing was, Dad did seem happy with Bulldog Face. He spoke about her all the time, and always in glowing terms. And to be honest, that wasn't really a problem. She certainly wasn't someone I would choose to spend my declining years with. But if that's what he wanted, who are we to judge, right? Well, that would be right, if Dad's happiness was the only thing that changed.
And then her daughter.
Oh, the daughter. That's right. That's when she moved her daughter in, wasn't it?
Well, yeah.
I don't think I ever met the daughter.
You're not missing much.
She was all right. Like, she was better than the mum. Like,
she was better than the mum. High praise. Jesus.
Yeah, but she wasn't exactly like her, is what I'm meaning. Like, she wasn't like a little mini version. Well, she probably was.
Bulldog Face had 2 kids. A son who was about my age, in his 20s, and a daughter, a little older than Aria. And when Dad put that engagement ring on Bulldog Face's finger, he took it seriously. Not just pledging a commitment to her, but to her 2 kids also.
Like, as soon as they were announced as being engaged, then he'd taken on her son as an apprentice. And you don't just take on an apprentice. Like, you either do it through the government and it's all very official, or it's someone you really know and trust, because it's a big commitment to take someone on. But
Seemingly, he had her son on immediately
As I've mentioned earlier, I was all grown up at this point and living away from home. So Dad taking on father duties with another woman's son didn't really affect me. But what was concerning was Dad moving another woman's daughter into his house, especially when he had one of his own who was in need of his attention during what was still a very bitter divorce.
I think he tried to be sensitive with me because he wasn't sure how I would feel about it, and I just didn't care.
I don't know about that. It's another daughter in his house. I think you probably did care about it. I mean, you were really young at the time, so...
Not really young. I mean, I was like 15 or something.
Yeah, but you had limited access to him, and this girl had full-time access to him. Like, what was your... You had some sort of set visitation, right?
It wasn't made visitation. I think it was just agreed upon between Mum and Dad that I would go visit him once a fortnight. Like, I'd go for a weekend every second week, but it wasn't every second week. Like, it wasn't set in stone or anything, but I tried to.
That's what I'm saying. Once every fortnight isn't very much.
It was less than that, but we just tried to make it that. So, yeah, I didn't see him that much, really, once they separated.
What about apart from visitation? Did you, did he call you on the phone, or did you have contact like that?
No, he didn't really call me or anything. And I mean, when he did, he'd be drunk and trying to yell at Mum. So that was fun.
Did he actually get you to relay messages to Mum? Because I remember the infamous Christmas when he got us all to gang up on her. But if he was using you when you're in high school, that's pretty messed up, man.
Hey, I remember being like 15 or 16 and Dad calling me, and I thought he was calling to ask how school was, but he was drunk and calling about asking Mum if she could give him back his money and that she's a bitch and all that.
Yeah, you definitely got it worse than me. I would get calls from Dad bitching about Mum and how horrible she was, but I never had to relay it through to her. That's pretty extreme. It makes me wonder, do you know if Mum ever saw Bulldog Face?
I think Mum saw them together.
That's got to be the most gratifying thing, to see that as his rebound. Did she say anything?
I think she might have made one small comment like, "Oh, is that what your dad's with?" And I think she felt good about herself, because who wouldn't?
That is glorious. Is that what your dad's with? And then she busts out the champagne.
That's kind of what it was like. Like, oh, all right then.
It's like the ultimate validation.
But she only did that one comment, and she didn't really mention again to me ever. Apart from the car thing. She was pissed about the car thing.
And what is the car thing? The car thing is the point in the story where things start to escalate.
When I turned 16, I got my L's, and Dad went and bought this pretty bomb car. But, I mean, that's what you want for a first car. You don't want a good car. And it would stay at his house, and I'd obviously go for driving lessons with him when I went over every other weekend. And the daughter had the license, so she would drive that car around. She would drive that car a lot more than I did, but Dad...
With our beloved father sharing his bed with a growling succubus, and her demon offspring taking the place of his own daughter, more and more things began to resemble something penned by the brothers Grimm, as Bulldog Face tried to corrupt little Aria.
I'd turned 16, and she was getting a tattoo on her boob, and she asked if I wanted to get a tattoo on my boob with her. And she did not think anything was wrong.
What did she get a tattoo of?
She got a butterfly tattoo.
How can something so beautiful be put on something so horrible?
Except it didn't look like a butterfly by the time the skin was unstretched and dangling down.
I never saw her naked.
Neither did I, thank God. My God.
Thankfully, because I wouldn't have the gift of my sight anymore if that happened. But have you seen Something About Mary?
Yes.
You know that the I think it's her housemate, that old creature, and
Yes.
then you see her like topless or whatever at some point,
Yes.
and then it's just those two hangy breasts.
Yes.
That's what it's... Yes.
Yes, classic example of a leather person. That's her.
Leather person.
Aria and the Leather Person. It even sounds like the title of a classic fairy tale. But unlike the title might suggest, in the end, Aria's real battle would be for her father's soul. And at the moment, she was losing.
Dad forced me to go on a camping trip with her and the daughter. And I was being nice and everything, and I went to stoke the fire, and all of them were drinking beers. Even the daughter, who was only a year older than me. They're all drinking beers. Dad creeps up behind me and pours half a beer down my butt crack in front of them all. And they all start laughing at me. And so I got really upset. I started crying. And then Dad proceeded to yell at me in front of both of them. And so I went and locked myself in his car and cried.
Growing up, we all had an idealised picture of our father. For us, he was brave and wise and strong and moral. He was our protector, and he truly was our hero and a mentor that we all looked up to. Over time, certain events have deteriorated this idealised image that we have of our father, and I can say with honesty that this event is not one of them. In fact, shortly after this event, Dad solidified his hero status for several more years when he booted Bulldog Face out of his house for good. It all happened on Aria's 17th birthday.
So it was my birthday, and Bruce and Ellie had come up to visit.
Ellie and Bruce, who were married and living in the city, had drove in for the night to celebrate with Aria. The three had spent the day at the beach before heading out to dinner, and when the trio arrived at the restaurant, Dad and Bulldog Face were waiting for them.
Dad and Bulldog Face had obviously been arguing for a while because the tension between them was not good. And then Dad and her just blow up at each other about my car. Bulldog Face was like,
No, you're gonna pay for it. I don't have to pay for it.
and it turns out he wanted her to pay for the rego for the car, considering I'd only driven it probably 3 times. And then Dad dumps like a wad of cash onto the table because we'd already ordered, and then walks out, and she walks out after him. We all sort of sit there stunned. Then Bulldog Face comes back, but Dad doesn't come back. And the food comes out, and she eats dinner with us like nothing happened. Yeah, it was just insane.
As Bulldog Face lapped the chicken tikka masala from the bowl, Ellie and Aria gazed on in awe. Did this mean the spell had been broken? And Dad might finally be able to see this woman for who she truly was? Or as Aria would later put it,
All the shine had got off her leathery skin.
these suspicions were confirmed later that night, when all the extra attention that Dad was giving to Aria proved more than she could handle.
Midnight hit. Everyone started singing happy birthday to me, and then Bulldog Face appeared and started screaming at Dad. So Dad started snapping back, and I, over the top of them, just went, Bulldog Face, can you just go back to bed? I didn't say Bulldog Face. And then Bulldog Face just went off at me.
Boo-hoo! Oh, it's your birthday. Oh, it's your birthday, is it? Ah!
And then Dad just lost it and screamed at her to get out. And she ran inside, closed the door behind her. He followed her, ripped the fly screen door off, screaming at her to get out of my house, get out.
And just like that, the good king vanquished the evil from his kingdom, and him and the princess lived happily ever after. At least, that's the way I've always remembered things anyway. But is this the real story? One of my goals in making these episodes has always been to find closure in examining the truth. More often than not, different people have different truths, and that's okay. My aim is to explore these truths, even if I don't always agree with them. But with this story, there were no different truths. All of our opinions were locked. This woman was a supervillain. And it didn't matter how hard I tried to erect some other hidden truth, we always ended up with the same conclusion. I guess my main concern is just that, is this all there is to this story? Like, after all of this recording, we've basically come to the conclusion that she was horrible. You know, she was this evil person, she came into our lives, she turned everything upside down, and then she left. And of course, I remember she was horrible, but
is that all there was to it? Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's what it was like. It was just there was like in that, short space of time that he was with her, like everyone has a story to say about it, like at least 2 or 3, because she was just such a nasty piece of work.
Well, them breaking up was the best birthday present I could have got.
I feel like we just sort of, had a bit of a cheers and had a drink after that, and we were like, it was like a weight had been lifted.
Yes.
Yeah, see you later, leather skin woman, dog face.
Okay, well, I do get what you're saying, but like all I'm trying to say is that I think maybe it was Leatherface and Dad in the relationship, so maybe some of the blame should lay on him. Maybe it wasn't just her. Do you know what I mean?
I think he was just going through the breakup of a 25 plus year relationship, and he grabbed on to the next thing because he didn't know how to be alone.
No, but now you're just making excuses for why he might have done something wrong. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying, like, if you think about it, he basically took on another family for a short period and pushed his own family away. I mean, that's something that he did that was wrong. So could we say that at least that was his fault and maybe not hers?
Well, it took her having a go at me for him to sort of, that spell to be completely broken. Like, oh, she is a piece of shit. She's yelling at my daughter on her birthday. Like,
but,
No,
but the thing is, now you're just saying that she had him under a spell, and so he was a victim of her. So again, I don't think we're going to get to the bottom of this today.
And maybe that's the real takeaway at the heart of this tale. The way we sometimes use time and perspective to distort reality into what we want it to be. Did Bulldog Face really look like a tanned Hans Mole man with hair plugs? That's certainly how I see her in my mind's eye. And if that's the case, was she also a wicked leather person who cast a spell on our virtuous father? Because I see that in my mind's eye too. I asked Aria if she ever bumped into Bulldog Face after the breakup. She said she did, once in a while. That was until 5 years ago anyway. What happened 5 years ago? I asked her. That's when they upgraded the Scummy, she said. Apparently, with the gentrification of the area, there wasn't room for a degenerate-filled dive bar bordering the shopping centre anymore. And in its place, the council erected a brand new, award-winning family pub, complete with playground for the kids. As you might imagine, the locals were overjoyed with the upgrade, and the better class of clientele it attracted. But for me, it's kind of sad. Just another relic of my youth falling by the wayside. So where did Bulldog Face go? I asked her. To one of the shitty pubs on the outskirts of town, she told me. That's where all the old regulars went. One day, I might take a trip out to the border towns and visit some of these dive bars for myself. See if I can't track down the Bulldog and get her perspective. Although, if she hears this episode, she might not want to talk to me. But if she did, I'd be interested. Until then, I'm happy to remember her as I always have. As the myth, as the legend, as Bulldog Face. Next time on Walking on Eggshells with an Emotional Vampire. In an episode that takes us to the Soviet Union and back, we explore the origins of the Ruski Avenger.
But this is where it gets a bit scary, right? Because Dad believes it was the oil companies that got to him. He said that the oil companies must have found out that he had this new technology that would make fossil fuels obsolete, and that would mean the world's dependence on oil would be gone, so they would lose all of their influence. And that's a big problem. And he said when he saw his brother, he had rage in his eyes, but he said he also saw fear. And he said that Uncle Lex was a true Cossack, so if they threatened him personally, he never would have backed down, because that's not the Cossack way. So he said they must have threatened to kill his wife and kids, because that's the only way that he would have ever backed down.
And that's where that fear came from that he saw in his eyes. And he said that fear was what prompted him to take the technology and give it to Russia. That's next time on Walking on Eggshells with an Emotional Vampire. If you enjoyed today's episode, why not let us know about it with an email to eggshellvampire@gmail.com. That's eggshellvampire@gmail.com. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you listen. And most importantly, tell your friends about us. We want to be heard. Walking on Eggshells with an Emotional Vampire is written, produced, and edited by me, Lucas Shaw. Thanks for listening.